Okay, so for today's drafting demonstration, I'm going to show you how to add an A-line flare to your skirt sloper. So I've traced around my skirt sloper. I'm using the front for this demonstration, but remember, whatever you do to the front, you do to the back. So, okay, so I've traced around this. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to join up. I've got my base of my dart. I've added all of the notches wherever I've had a notch, high hip, low hip. Actually, let's draw the low hip in here. So I've got my low hip line. I'm going to line up my dart legs. I'm not going to put a seam or a grain line on this just yet, but we will once we're all finished. There's no seam allowances, remember. So this is my front. So I'm just going to write here center front. So I am going to be adding an extension in the middle of this skirt to add the extra flare that we want. We're doing an A-line. So an A-line has a very straight line across the bottom when it's hanging as a hem, and yet it does have a little bit of a flare. So I want to add about a 2-inch extension in the middle here. So by doing that, I'm adding a 2-inch extension in the front. I'm adding a 2-inch extension in the back. So that's adding width in here. I'm also on the side seams going to add half of what I'm adding here. So I'm going to add 1 inch to the side at the front and 1 inch to the side at the back. So that's going to be 2 inches in total at the side. So now that I've got my lines all drawn, I want to determine where I'm going to draw this cut line. So you can take your ruler and square it off on the center front to the base of the dart. Measure this out, and I'm coming out just over 4 inches here. If I go down to the bottom, to where I've actually got a notch, because we've put notches in our slopers. So that's coming out at 4 inches, okay? So what I want to do is I want to actually add the extension, which is the flare of the skirt. So it's going to create a little bit of a ripple in the way the skirt hangs, which is just a nice flattering design detail. So I don't want it to come straight down. I actually want it to come about, so it's hitting through about the middle of my thigh. So I'm going to bring this over at the bottom here 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I've just drawn a line down here 3/4 of an inch. You can write 3/4 of an inch there, put an arrow just so that you know what you've done. Now I can take this ruler and I can line up base of my dart. Now you're going to use a pencil, so it's going to be a lot more accurate. My line is going to be quite heavy, so it's going to show a little more. So there you see, there's my line coming down. So now what I want to do is I want to first add the extension to the side of the skirt before I cut this up. So if I'm adding 2 inches here, I'm going to add 1 inch to the side. So I'm going to take my ruler over 1 inch. I'm going to mark that. Now I can take a straight ruler for the sake of this and just draw it so it blends back into the side seam. And there again, there's that fat marker, so you want to make sure you're using something nice and thin. Okay, so I'm coming in, so I don't have a hiccup in here. It's a nice straight line. If you feel the need, you can take and just find a spot with your curve, but it shouldn't, because we're flaring it out, we shouldn't need to have to add any curve in here. Okay, so now I've got my pattern all ready. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut up this line. So I'm going to cut all the way up this line here. So I'm going to cut right up to the base of my dart. Okay, so you can see I've stopped right at the base of my dart. Next thing I want to do is I want to take and I want to cut one of the legs of my dart. And I'm going to cut all the way down, but not through. I want to try to leave a little bit of a hinge for my dart and my my opening here. Okay, so I've got this all opened up. Might need it just a little bit more. Okay, so now I want to spread this. So this is where having a strip cut is very helpful, but I don't have one cut. So I'm just going to slice up the side of this piece of paper here. Make sure it's at least 2 inches. So I'm now going to slide this underneath, and I'm going to open up this bottom. And I'm going to spread it till I get to 2 inches. And once I measure from the very bottom hem, and I open this up, might have to pull it back on this side a little more. I have something to tape onto. So now I've got it coming at 2 inches. I'm going to take a couple of weights up here just to hold that in place. If you look at the top here, you'll see that my dart has been closed. So it's not completely closed, but it's half the size now. So that's fine. I'm just going to tape that closed. I still will have a dart to do, but it'll just be a lot narrower. So now when I come down here, I'm going to put some tape in here on either side. When you're taping your pattern, whenever you're adding an extension or something, if you're not going to retrace your pattern over, you want to make sure that you put lots of tape down, that all your seams or all of your cut openings are well taped. Okay, so here I've got my extension. So you can see I've added in here and I've added here at the side. Okay, so now I just have to fill in this little line here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to square it off at the bottom of the hem, and I'm going to bring it up to the base of the dart, and I'm going to hold it here, and I'm just going to hinge it across. So I'm going to swing it, and I'm going to make sure that it stays where it should on the base of that dart. And I'm just going to mark all the way across here. So I'm just taking and marking. So you see I've now got, now I can take a ruler. That's not going to work. I think I need a bit of a curve. So I just want to join all of these lines up. Okay. So make sure it's smooth. Make sure you don't have a peak in there. Okay, so it's a little hard to see with this marker. Okay, so we're almost done. Now, if you take a look at your side seam, you're going to see that it comes out on a little bit more of an angle. So what it means is this area here, when it's on my fabric, is going to be a little bit off grain. It's going to be on a little bit more of the bias. So whenever your seam or anything is on a bit of the bias, it has a bit of stretch to it. So in order to compensate for that bit of stretch that this seam is going to have and make it a little bit longer, we're actually going to shorten this side seam by 1/4 inch. So let's move this here. So I'm just going to line that up at the bottom with as 1/4 inch. So you can see I'm shortening this seam by 1/4 inch. Now I want to take, again, my curved ruler, and you want to bring this in. Just remember, you walk your ruler along as it needs to go. So I'm just going to blend it right back to where my seam is here. Now, it probably would have been a good idea to actually do that in a different color, because as you can see over here, I've got a lot of blue, and I'm not going to necessarily know which is the line that goes over here. So don't be afraid to use a few different colors on your sloper. Okay, so now I've got my A-line front done. When I do the back, I'm going to do the exact same. I'm going to measure down to the base of my dart, draw a line here. I'm going to take that measurement down to center back and draw a line over. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that 3/4 inch and connect this line here to the base of my dart. I'm now going to add an extension at the side of my back by 1 inch, bring it up to meet the side of my skirt. I'm going to cut up this line all the way to the base of the dart. I'm going to cut one of the darts, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of a hinge if possible. And then I'm going to spread this open by 2 inches, which is twice what I've put in the side. Slide a piece of paper in and add my extension. So if I kind of line in here, you can see this is all of the extra that we've added into this skirt pattern. So now my skirt pattern is all ready for me to put in my seam allowances. If I want 5/8 or a 1/2 inch, I'm going to do it all the way around. For an A-line skirt, because you want it to look nice and straight across the bottom, you're going to cut it either on the grain with a seam down the front, or you're going to cut it on the fold in the front. So that gives you a nice straight line at the bottom of your skirt when you're standing and wearing it. So that is an A-line flare. You might want to put that on your pattern so it doesn't, you don't forget it. A-line flare front. Much easier to do when you're not doing it upside down. Okay, so there's your A-line flare.